Good afternoon and welcome to AfterWords, which is the time period after our weekly virtual village sermon presentation on Sundays at 11:30. This is the time we reflect, expound, and dig into the message that was presented for that particular given day. My name is Kafense Chike. I welcome everyone and encourage you to continue to view us. As you view us, like us, and of course, share our broadcast. It's a pleasure and an honor to introduce the speaker, our own Bishop Deja Nava, who gave us a very powerful presentation today, a sermon titled, Use Your Power. And this sermon is essential in introducing the idea of Pentecost, which is a very important part of our theology and the practices of the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church. So we like to urge you to tune in, turn on, lend us your spirit, lend us your energy, post questions in the chat. And I'd like to also welcome the additional guests we have here, Walimu Olatunji, and also Major Taketake. And I just like to say welcome. And I'd like to ask Bishop Deja Nava if you have something you may like to open with, considering that we have you here in our midst today, live and in living color.
Well, I'm really honored and grateful to be in the presence of such powerful people, brothers and sisters. I'm always honored when I'm asked to bring a word on behalf of the people of God. You know, I think Pentecost is such an important season, not just because of the historical significance, but the power that it holds for us today. You know, when I hear the story of Pentecost, I'm reminded of the struggles that the disciples had to go through, but I'm also reminded of the triumph that happened once they came back together as a group. And one of the things that moves me during the season is the emphasis on working as a collective group and the power that can be manifested when you come together as a group. And I think that's something that we can do on a regular basis. In other words, we can have the Pentecost at any time, in any place.
And I like to say thank you for that. What I thought about as I viewed the sermon is how in the more traditional Christian church, which many of us come from, our beginning and ending of communing with the Holy Spirit or being in tune with God or having some sense of divine mission is often tied to the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. And you clearly pointed out in our church, we have 7 seasons of faith. And so it doesn't stop with the crucifix and resurrection. And it takes us into Pentecost, which I think many of us don't even have a concept of. So I think that's super important. And it gives us a way to continually, which this was an important part of your message too, renewal, rebirth. So could you maybe, if you don't mind, say a little more about that?
Well, the annual cycle of rebirth is something that goes on. It's a continual cycle. And we have to realize that we live in a perpetual cycle of rebirth. You know, every day when we wake up, that's a new birth. You know, we're being resurrected. You know, at night we go to sleep. It's like we live in a perpetual cycle. And when we think that healing or power comes only at one given time, we limit ourselves to the potential that we have as a people. You know, there's unlimited potential, unlimited growth that we can accomplish, and we recognize it as part of the cycle. So we realize it's not just one particular time of the year that we should be aware of our power, but it's ongoing. So we start at the beginning of the year with renewal. You know, we go through Lent, we go through Pentecost, then we go through communion. Those 7 cycles take us throughout the year, and we continue on that cycle because that's the way the universe works.
Yes, and I think this demonstrates the ebb and flow of our existence and of our faith. Of course, the disciples were challenged. They were faced with a challenge that they obviously weren't prepared for with the crucifixion of Jesus. And you point out how they had these are my words, kind of a season, if you will, of disarray, but they realized the need to face the adversity and come together to rise above this in terms of being able to draw from the power of the group, so to speak. And I would just like to ask Major Takeda K or Wally Muolatundi if you have some comments or some things that may have particularly spoke to you in the sermon today, or you may have questions for Bishop DeGenova.
Okay, comment and questions, probably all together. But I've known Bishop DeGenova for a very long time. And I always thought of her as one of the most brilliant women that I've ever known. But what I would like to what I like more information about, or maybe just comment on when you talk about use your power, because sometimes the word power is powerful in itself. And when you talk about power, I'm thinking that you talking about the talents and the gifts and the knowledge that we have, but through our group, it can be developed, and it's unlimited potential for us to come out of that, the traumas and the oppressions and the depressions and all the other issues that we have once we come together as a group. Because it seems like the disciples were in doubt, but it takes the group, and it took the group to keep them together, even though there were some that didn't make it. But the point is that they did make it. And so when you talk about the group, and we know about the group experience and how powerful it is, can you just touch on that a little more about the power within the group and how the group helped each other to make it, to become more powerful with everything that's going on with people today, and how we can make it with the education systems, with the, and education by itself has so many different components, and you are an educator. So can you just relate what the disciples were going through and the followers of Jesus was going through, and how we're going through similar situations? Is different, but it's still the same.
Right. The disciples, they were going through when Jesus was building his movement, as I said earlier, it was a movement that was fighting against Roman oppression. They were being oppressed. They weren't able to determine their own destiny. They were under foreign domination. So they were limited in what they could do, how they could express themselves, how they could thrive. They were told where to go, when to go, and how to do it. Similar as to how we are. We find that more and more our rights are being stripped away. We've been limited in the things that we do, and now you can't go anywhere without being, victimized by, an oppressive system. So they were fighting against that type of domination. Their goal was not for Jesus to be crucified. They felt, as it's in the scripture, he would be the one that would redeem Israel. They believed that him lead Israel to their liberation. We have had certain periods in our history where we had a leader, we had movements that were moving us in a positive direction, and then we had setbacks. I think that most recently, when you hear about the Black lawmakers in Tennessee who were trying to stand up for the fact that children were being murdered in their classrooms, and just they were silenced because they dared to go against whatever the status quo was in that legislature. But even though they were faced with adversity, because they were not being greeted with open arms in the legislature, they still stood up. And what happened is they ended up getting support from what they felt was an unlikely source. The children in the community started uprising, and the parents started, coming to their rescue. So thousands of people rallied behind them. What was supposed to be a private hearing in a small chamber in the state became a national issue. So that's the power of the group at work. The group can come, when people come together as a group, they can do those things. They can make things happen in a way that you can't even conceive of.
Thank you.
Yes, I too am a big fan of this powerful, creative, intelligent Black woman we call Bishop D. Janaba, one of my first group leaders. And it's just inspirational that from the day I met you, you have been consistent to this day and committed to the empowerment and upliftment of Black people. Thank you for a very powerful sermon again today. I was inspired by when you talked about Pentecost in terms of us coming back together, Black people coming back together, that we may face many difficulties wherever we are, locally, nationally, internationally, but we are reminded that our power resides in coming back together, that the individual power, the innate power that we are born with, that sometimes is never really fully understood. But when we understand the power that we have within us, that power is magnified when we come back together as a communal people, as a group. That power is magnified. And I was impressed when you talked about how the disciples indicated that we thought that he would be the one. Oftentimes, still today, we're looking outside of ourselves for deliverance. We think that the group leader is the one, that the minister is the one, that somebody outside of ourselves, but we have power within ourselves, and we need to use that power. And with the disciples coming back together, they realized that, hey, the struggle continues. And they needed to magnify the power that they had within themselves by coming back together as a group and continuing to struggle for the liberation of Black people.
And that's a hopeful thing. That's a hopeful thing too, that you can come back together. Because sometimes we don't give ourselves grace. Sometimes we may fall off and say, you know what, I was working on this project and I didn't stick with it or didn't work out, but you can come back. There's an opportunity to come back. You know, you can reboot, you can, regroup. There's, as long as we still have breath, we can come back and do the things that we need to do. Those are the things. And I'm jumping in here because I'm getting ready to go to another service right now here in Houston. But I just want us to know that we have the power. Each one of us has power. Amen. And I think Takeda K touched on it earlier when she said, sometimes we think that there has to be a massive amount. It could be a smile. The energy that we share, the words that we share, a touch, a simple touch, a text message, a post, that yields power. Because when it's given with a good intent, it will reach other people. And now that we have this virtual space, we can reach people around the world. It doesn't have to be just the people who are on our regular feed. It can go different places and touch people in places that we haven't even known about. And I think we just have to continue to use that power. And as we continue to use that power, we will see liberation.
Bishop
yes,
Dejanaba, before you go, I know you have to go. I think that ability to come back, you made a comment about sometimes, for whatever reason, we may say, well, I tried, I'm going to let that go. But I think what's built into the 7-season cyclical model for our calendar, it has built in it points for us to revive ourselves. It's reflected in the faith, so to speak. And if we just use that model, when we get discouraged or down, it can revitalize us. And of course, that speaks to the power of the group and the connectedness of the group, which I think you point out that the disciples realized. But I want to back up just a little bit to resurrection, because we know there is a demographic or an entity of Christians that place a lot of basis on the resurrection, and it's very literal, like Jesus is going to come back off of a cloud or on a cloud or whatever. And could you say a little bit of how the resurrection was reflected in the disciples' ability to renew themselves to continue that work?
The experiences that they had, the experiences that they felt, they were with Jesus, that created the resurrection, the risen Christ for them. they had experiences. They shared those experiences. I know that we probably us has had a loved one that has departed in transition, but the once you talk about that person, you think about those experiences, they live within you, and the resurrection occurs. But the resurrection was not just for Jesus. The resurrection is also for us. And with that, I'm gonna see you guys on the next time.
Well, we
But
appreciate
continue
you
to struggle. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you for your years of commitment and your very insightful, poignant presentation today. And we're looking forward to more. And I'll just say Asante Sana, because I could give accolades for the rest of the time we have. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Bishop.
See.
So as we continue, I think we have a little time left. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to share for this particular segment of AfterWords?
I just wanted to speak a little bit about the point that she made in terms of we being co-creators, that the power that is within us is a living power with the unlimited possibilities of creation. The things that the concepts that we embrace in our minds, the thoughts that we have, if we activate them, if we act on them, it is a creative process. Even as individuals, it's a creative process. But when we bring that creative possibility and potential to a group of Black people who also have the ability to be co-creators, we magnify that power. And there's nothing that we cannot do in terms of problem solving and moving toward a new reality for our people.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm reminded, I was going to ask before she left, one of the points she makes is that for the past 70 years, the church has sought to bring out the best in ourselves. And we know for many, many years, there was a practice of core, and now we have
You're now muted.
I was just reminded, one of the points she made a reference to the 70-year period that the church has emphasized bringing out the best in ourselves, how we've had systems, practices, programs that help us to bring out the best in ourselves. And now we call that best self theology. And I think the process as she laid it out with the disciples as they moved towards Pentecost was an experience that helped them to bring their best selves out. And I just wanted to emphasize, I'm sorry we don't have her here to elaborate more, that this church has sought to make that a major focus because it's through best self theology that we're able to tap into that power that we are given and to actualize that power, as you said, to solve the problems that we have, but to do anything that we need to do. And she also talked about she emphasized the reality that what we're doing is going to be hard. It's a given that there's going to be challenge. The oppressors and the oppression is going to do what it does. But by tapping into our power, the same power we talked about, that enables us to not only realize the reality of our struggle, but it armors us to overcome it, regardless of what the enemy or the oppressor throws at us. Major Takeda K, did you have something you'd like to add?
Yes. One of the other points that Bishop DeGeneva made was she did mention on systemic racism. And I can see that when we talk about systemic racism in our church, and we talk about it outside our church, people don't understand that just like everything evolves, that systemic racism has evolved, and you don't have to be white or Caucasian to participate and perpetuate it. perpetuated. And the good thing, one of the things that come to mind is that the brothers that, you know, the police officers and a young Black man, okay, they beat him. I believe that that was still a part of systemic racism. Even though their skin is Black, they participated in it. And sometimes we get, without the group, that positive group experience, whatever group that we're a part of, we become a part of it and we take on their values, their morals, their ethics, and their values, as opposed to our divine powers that we have been given by God.
You know, I love the example you used, how those, I think it was 5 or 6 brothers actually beat this brother. And it's very well documented by our church, Jaramogi Baby Ajiman, the teachings of our church, and a host of other scholars and intellectuals, that this process or this experience of oppression, part of what it does or can do is cause us to internalize it. Mm-hmm. And we, in essence, become agents of the oppressor. In the group process, everywhere you go, if you go to school, if you go to work, in your family, there's a group process, which is social pressure to get you to conform to that particular group. And all of us that are involved in the struggle, there's a group process to reinforce the positive nature, the positive impact of being involved in the struggle and understanding it. But in a similar fashion, there's a group process amongst the oppressor that seeks to pressure us to conform. And if we look at the plantation, there was group pressure to get us to conform to what the oppressor wanted us to do. People like Harriet Tubman, Nat Turner, they were able to defy that group process, and they understood who they were. So rather than say, okay, I acquiesce like maybe these police did, I'm a police officer, I had a power of the state. Harriet Tubman, Marcus Garvey, we can name all, we know who the people are. Mm-hmm. They, I think, availed themselves to a similar process as the apostles and were able to go to that divine spark, which we all have, and were able to operate from that place. So they defied the enemy's group process and tapped into the source, which is the creator, that cosmic energy and creative intelligence. And as Dejanava points out, Bishop Dejanava pointed out to us, and as we all shared in this meeting, we have the ability to do that. And the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church has continuously availed us to processes that can help us to learn and understand that. And we have a cycle, a year-long cycle that continuously allows us to renew, be born again in the sense of coming back to that power, so that we can be strengthened for the earthly battles that we have as people trying to bring about a better world for our people.
That's a very important point that you made, that we have been socialized by an enemy system, that we are powerless. And you can see in the broader Black community, brothers and sisters saying that Black people will never do anything, that we don't have the ability to address the massive issues that face us, and we must be in some way dependent on a source outside of ourselves for our salvation. One thing about the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church is that we are a living example that is not true. That when Black people come together of like minds and use our God-given power, and that power is magnified in the group, we move beyond talk to action, and we create the institutions that are essential for our survival and that address all the problems that we face in our day-to-day life. Those institutions are then passed on from generation to generation. And as new members contribute their power to that process, it continues to grow in the ability to transform the Black world.
The made it to KDK. I'm sorry, I'm trying to kind of perpetuate some balance here. So I think we need that female perspective and the male perspective to be a complete perspective.
Okay, well, I have to agree with Wallamu. I mean, he kind of summed it up. But what I was thinking in addition to that is, my thing is the group. You know, it starts with our family. And I know it started with my family, and through my family, that's how I was able to meet Bishop DeGeneva, through my family. So when you talk about that, and you touched on that rebirth, you know, at the year goes through and it's a cycle. Well, it's always a cycle because it's going to come around. You know, when they talk about that 6 degrees of separation, we can meet someone today and we can start a conversation with them. And the next thing you know, we're talking about our family, and not just this generation, but we can go all the way back. We can go back. You touched on slavery and the things that was happening on the plantation. Well, here I am in Florida, and I'm meeting people daily, and I'm talking to them, and I'm finding out, you know, well, you know, where are you from? I'm like, well, I came here from Houston, but I was born in Detroit. Well, grandparents are from Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. Okay, so now it's like, so now it's like, when you talk to people, when you talk about where your family is from, and you're going to meet someone who's from the same place, and then they start talking about, well, how they grew up, how their grandparents grew up, and you know, we're just basically one step away from slavery, from slave plantations, because of the programs that were put in place then are still in place. Some of the programs that we've gotten rid of, they're trying to bring back. And so we need the group, and I feel that the group is very important, and the group begins with the family.
For sure, I agree 100%. And I think your example of how your family, it was through your family that you met Bishop DeGeneva, and I'm assuming that led to you becoming a part of the church and all of this. And for me, that's another example of the group process at work. The group, your family extended itself and felt like this is a way, this is something good that they shared with you. But I would be remiss, or I want to not negate, we have viewers watching on YouTube, and you do have a comment from Aaron Jackson, who expressed simply identifying with the oppressor. I don't see a question in there, but would either of you or both of you like to maybe respond to that? Because part of what we want to do, even though people are not immediately with us, they're viewing on YouTube, and we want them to be included in this discourse. So if either one of you could share any response you may have to that, it would be appreciated.
Well, clearly, there's a lot of conversation around the idea of the upcoming election, whether it's voting for Democrats or Republicans. You can clearly see that among those two groups, the nation is divided. Oftentimes, people will talk about how one Republican, like a former president, did not have our best interests at heart, but sometimes we forget that millions of white Americans voted for him and his ideals. And while a lot of us struggle between the two notions of who would do better for us, we sometimes forget that only we can do what is right for us. Educating our own children, dealing with our adolescent population, providing decent housing, feeding our people. Those are ultimately responsibilities that we must take on ourselves course, we look for whatever support that we could get outside of ourselves, but ultimately, that's our responsibility to be able to address those issues that are essential for the positive growth and development of our own people.
Thank you for that, Wale Olatunji.
Oh, when we talk about identifying with our oppressors, I look at it like this. Every day, I mean, when you consider who runs the world, when you consider who has the resources that are necessary for us to thrive in this world. So there are some things we probably participate in and do that we don't necessarily want to, but this is our way. We have to maintain our life, our livelihood. So because we do these things, but we also have to realize that we have to be strong enough, and we have to know in our minds that just because you participate in these things and you do these things, and most likely the biggest culprit I would say is the workforce. You know, you go to work and you're one way at work, and you have to be a certain way at work, can't say certain things, but as long as we know and understand who we are and whose we are, then we're able to do it and not become too overly involved and too dependent and too relying on the oppression, on the oppressor's way of life. Because there are certain things that we need, we just don't have. But if we know how to tap into it and get what we need and leave the rest alone.
Okay, I just had a blurb of a message that I thought kicked me out of the meeting. I think we are out of time. It was a very powerful sermon. Use your power, and I hope that we continue to use our power. And I also encourage those viewing us in whatever venue or format that you are, that you continue to join us every Sunday as we not only present you with a message, but we invite you, along with viewing the message, to engage in conversation and discourse. Oftentimes you can even talk to the presenter of the message, and our objective is to help you get a better understanding of what it is that we're trying to accomplish, which is the liberation of our people. Did either of you have any closing comment before we go?
Use your power.
All right. Well, we'd like to thank you again very much on behalf of the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church and our weekly virtual village sermon on Sunday at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and immediately following the virtual church service, we have the AfterWords program, which this is. My name is Kafense Chike. We thank you for tuning in with us, and we urge you to share this video and the sermon, all of our posts, and to also like them. And you're also able to give us by simply going to the shrineoftheblackmadonna.org. Thank you very much, and